Some people just don't know how to behave as human beings. We're all becoming wild predators, day by day. No one really cares to reflect on themselves and try to atone for their mistakes. Rather, everyone is living in these fast-paced times where people like to show off their crappy behavior because they know they have a chance of becoming famous because somewhere, someone is recording their actions on their phones. You know, that's still okay because at least they're being trashy on their own accord. But some people, like my mother-in-law, are trying to behave trashy but want to use other people to bail themselves out. It's all messed up. These times and people none make any sense to me, or am I the only one with this kind of complaint here? Is anyone else here who can relate with me? Before you say yes, let me go ahead and explain the quote behind the scenes prior to explaining the situation I'm in this, well, it's caused all this irritation for me. My name is Gary. I'm 30 years old and a police officer. The reason behind my ranting and all is none other than my mother-in-law. She's a total freak. A Karen-like character you all see in those memes, and she is the bane of my existence. I don't know how she does this, but she is someone I cannot fathom easily. You might wonder why my mother-in-law behavior bothers me. It's because she uses my profession to escape punishment. Even though she lives so far away, she still remembers to interrupt the flow of my life and my family's life too. She says I'm married to her daughter, hence I'm her son-in-law, so I'll have to indulge her once. And I want to ask her why her opinion of me has suddenly changed. You see, Sarah, my wife, 30 female, and I started dating just a few years ago. She was working as a school teacher at a private school, which was some 500 meters away from an Indian restaurant. She frequented this Indian restaurant in the lane across from the police station. It's a famous restaurant, to be honest, so me and my friends would also visit it quite often. It was delicious. Also, because that was the only eatery nearby, and I would never carry lunch as I never learned how to cook. Anywho, I saw Sarah a couple of times, and my friends would tease me for gazing at her whenever she walked in with her friends from work or sometimes alone. She had also noticed me a couple of times, and one day, Sarah, she came alone, occupying the table beside us, and my friends started teasing me again. Although they murmured in a low tone, Sarah heard it. She stood up and walked towards our table facing us, and she said, "I can hear it all. You should be embarrassed." She walked out with a look that clearly said she was disgusted to hear our conversation, which included her. We had no bad intentions, but we understood our mistake. I ran after Sarah, and I apologized to her. To my surprise, she forgave me, and I blabbered some rubbish just to initiate a conversation. I asked whether she had a boyfriend, and on her refusal, I released a sigh of relief, which she seemed to notice. She smiled, which showed she was not disgusted at my forthright question. Well, I did it. I jumped at the opportunity and asked her if she wanted to grab a bite or maybe coffee nearby. She agreed to that, and this is how things started to develop between us. I was the one taking the initiative, while I was also the one who was constantly awkward because of my nervousness. One day she scoffed, asking if I was really a police officer because she thought I was continuously so nervous. I said I was only nervous in her presence because, well, I liked her. She blushed, and our story picked up the pace. A few months into our relationship, Sarah took me to see her mother, who lived just a few kilometers from Sarah's condo. Sarah was brought up by her mother alone, as her dad and mom separated when Sarah was 9. My mother-in-law was a good mother to Sarah, who took care of her in the finances and taught her to be self-reliant. When Sarah told me this on the way to her mom's place, it made me think very highly of her, until I met her in person. When we reached it, a car stood on the road, and a woman was slapping the car window, shouting, "You won't get away with it just like that." Sarah stopped the car in front of the house, and I rushed out of the car and went straight to see what happened. The woman saw me and, well, ignored me. I showed her my ID card, which I always carry with me. She took a step back, talking loudly about how the guy in the car was keeping a watch on her house. I asked the guy to come out, asking him sternly why he was in front of that woman's house. The guy said that he was not keeping an eye on that woman's house, further saying that it had only been 20 minutes since he stopped his car there and was waiting for his girlfriend to sneak out of her house from the next alley over. The moment I was asking him to prove it, a girl came running and halted in front of the car, shouting, "Paul!" Well, I assumed it was the guy's name, and she was his girlfriend, and I found out after confirming with him. The woman was still berserk and saying cuss words to those kids when Sarah intervened and hugged her. Do you know who that woman turned out to be? She was none other than my soon-to-be mother-in-law. 10 minutes later, we were inside the house where Sarah introduced me to her mother. Looking at Sarah, the first thing she said was, "Why black?" Sarah gave her a stern look mixed with embarrassment and a smile to her mom and asked me to not be bothered by her, as she could be insensitive sometimes. Her mom asked her to bring coffee and some snacks from the kitchen. I assumed she wanted to say something to me in private. Thus, she needed to distract Sarah, and I was right. As soon as Sarah left, her mom looked at me in the eyes and said, "I'll be friendly with you. I don't think that you two would make a beautiful couple. What I mean is that my daughter is beautiful, and I cannot say the same about you." How can you react in a situation like this, except by telling her that you really love her daughter, and the beauty is only a perception? She scoffed at my perception and at me for being narrow-minded. I was still thinking, what did she even mean by beautiful couple? It was incredibly confusing to me. She kept on telling me about her expectations, vis-a-vis the guy appropriate for her daughter. Meanwhile, Sarah returned with a tray full of cookies, snacks, and coffee. She asked what we two were talking about, and her mother says, "Oh, nothing much." Sarah looked at my face, and I tried to be as genuine as possible with a fake smile, but she caught on to it. Then her mom asked Sarah about how she met me. She had the most interesting and irritating queries to ask her daughter, as she would go on and on, simply digging into why her daughter became interested in a person with black skin like me. Even though she did not make it apparent, it was still crystal clear, at least to me. Sarah told her the anecdotes and mentioned that I was a police officer. Her mom, who was sipping on her coffee, paused to take a look at me, and in surprise she said, and I quote, "Oh, you're a police officer." Sarah mentioned how she could forget that quickly when he, which means I, had shown my ID just a while ago to her while she was arguing with the car guy who was doing nothing outside. She scoffed it off and cursed her bad memory, and I noticed a change in her attitude towards me once she realized I was a police officer. She was so busy discussing her, quote, expectations that she did not ask me about my occupation. She then asked about my position, salary, everything. She seemed interested in me now, even though it did not change the fact that I was black. She asked me about my family, and I told her that my parents lived in the countryside. I do often go to visit them. They were agriculturists, and she went, "You mean farmers?" I was like, yeah. I told her I had a very humble childhood. Long story short, Sarah and I got married last year. Her mom became my mother-in-law, and I felt how smoothly everything worked out. But a revelation was about to prove me wrong. Sarah and I were on our honeymoon when Sarah received a call from her mother. She told Sarah she was given a ticket for parking in the wrong lane, and she wanted Sarah to ask me to help her. She said she was with the officer who gave her the ticket and wanted me to talk to him then and there. It was the beginning of trouble. The beginning of my mother-in-law using my occupation as a shield for herself, and Sarah did not urge me in a direct manner, yet for her sake I was obliged to help her mother out. I talked to the officer, who turned out to be an acquaintance of mine. He agreed to let my mother-in-law go this time, but it was something I did not know would keep happening. Well, one day, She was in a supermarket and she forgot the direction for the exit or something, and being upset at her stupidity, she started shouting curse words, which, by the way, were her, quote, bad habits. So, people tried to calm her down, but things got worse when she picked up a bottle of ketchup from the shelf and thrashed it on the ground, creating a scene there. When they tried to call the cops, my mother-in-law boastfully shouted that she had a sister working as a police officer. That day, she called me up, saying she had called Sarah, who told her I was not at home. I mean, obviously, why would I even do that when I have duty? My mother-in-law did not understand that simple thing, as she had already made it a bad habit of calling me up, this or that, a bit of chaos that she's been erupting in people's lives, and letting no one breathe peacefully. I mean, I wondered how she got along with the neighbors, but that too became clear when I saw how the lady who lived in the neighborhood behaved. She too could be called Karen. Well, I digressed a bit, but I was telling you how my mother-in-law called me up when she created a ruckus at the supermarket. The cops had already arrived there, and I was extremely embarrassed when my mother-in-law handed the phone to the cops without even briefing me about the situation. I mean, she clearly had the guts to do that, and the cop was from a different police station, and not somebody I even knew. So I definitely had trouble requesting that I pay the fine and make sure it did not happen again. They headed my request and let my mother go since there was no further charges pending against her. I was already infuriated by my mother-in-law's behavior. So I asked Sarah to talk to her mother. I have no idea what she said to her mom, but my mother-in-law has been quiet for the past few weeks. However, I think she's back on track because this time she picked up a fight with someone. And I was called by my senior, who asked me to solve the situation, and I'm not sure how. I've no idea that has really happened. I will figure it out soon once I reach the place where my mother-in-law is held. I'm writing this here to seek a bit of suggestions from you guys. If any one of you knows how to handle a Karen and a character like my mother-in-law, you're welcome already to give me a bit of help. I know even if I resolve this issue here, my mother-in-law simply won't stop. So tell me if there's a solution I cannot foresee. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. So today's update has 4 updates, but before we hop into update number 1, there's 2 comments from the original post that I want to read really quickly, and let me know in the comment section down below which one you agree with the most. Comment number 1 says, maybe OP is too scared of his mother-in-law. Otherwise, he'd have her arrested by now. She's treating him like her private property. Comment number 2. Don't argue with Karen. Just give them a taste of their own medicine and screw them up. So guys, it looks like the comment section's not very happy with the mother-in-law of OP, but let me know your opinion. Hit that subscribe button if you guys are new to the channel for daily stories, and let's jump into update number 1. I can't say that I'm not cursing the moment I found out that I would have to bear a woman because of another woman, knowing that the first woman is a total lost cause. Man, I'm so tired of all this, you know. First of all, I appreciate that you people are really showing empathy and coming up with some of the most hilarious suggestions. Someone has said I should make my mother understand by barging into her house and making my point at gunpoint. Man, you people can really be senseless sometimes. I'm a cop, not a bandit. Well, some of you have indirectly asked a really good question. Why am I not sending my mother-in-law straight to jail? Well, I'll tell you what. When you have a wife who takes pills for anxiety and loves her mother to death, what would happen if that wife found out her husband had sent her mother to jail? Yeah, Sarah has pretty bad anxiety and an anxiety disorder that she developed in childhood. I never had the chance to mention this because I never felt the need to. But I guess it'll make my point a little bit more clear once you know why I'm so hesitant to let my mother-in-law have her punishment. Sarah developed the issue only after her father left her and her mom. I think it was due to the fact that her parents' separation took a toll on her mental health, and she succumbed to anxiety. She felt underconfident and anxious all the time as her father was absent from her life then. She slowly got better with time, yet it has not gone completely, so even though I asked Sarah to talk to her mom about understanding that I have a duty, I didn't really tell her everything about her mom's doing. Now, I don't know what to do this time because what my mother-in-law has done is clearly out of my reach. Let me tell you guys this. My mother-in-law went to a mall and parked her car in the handicapped parking space, right? There was a handicapped person who came a little bit later and wanted to park the car. My mother-in-law came out of her car and started saying cuss words to that person who was a man. She called him all sorts of names and whatnot, and I clearly felt embarrassed when I reached the place of that person told me all this. He said he had just asked her to move the car politely, and she not only refused but also started swearing. She even thrashed her purse on the side of the mirror of that person's car, causing it to, cripple damage. Another officer who had accompanied me was holding my mother-in-law back as I talked to the man and the guard about the situation a bit further. You could see her face turning red with anger and her veins popping out of her temple as she kept on saying rubbish that I can't even describe here. So, that whole time I had to request my mother-in-law to keep her mouth shut as she'd keep saying, "He's my sister-in-law, he's a cop. He'll teach you a little lesson." My reaction was, why would I teach this man a lesson when he didn't do anything wrong here? How was I to make my mother-in-law understand that was a real problem? Meanwhile, my mother-in-law tried to release herself from the grasp of another officer, who was holding her by the elbow because she simply just would not stop being a menace to everyone present. When she failed to do so, my mother started saying nasty things to the officer, and even tried to misbehave by spitting on his face. I could not hold the situation any longer, so I arrested my mother-in-law on the spot. You may ask, how come I have my guts back now that I took such a bold step? Firstly, I was fed up with my mother's behavior. She's been using me and my job as she pays me for it. I've only become her son-in-law and not her private property. Yeah, I used your words from the comments, people, but let me really give you credit for it. You have opened up my eyes to the fact that this thing cannot be sorted out without taking charge of the situation. My mother-in-law constantly screamed as she was taken away by me and another officer in the car took her away. She called me racist names that I'm ashamed to even rewrite here. All I can tell you is that she'll be dealt with. Let's see how things will turn out for her and me, because, she has to be present at court next week because that man has filed a case against her, which includes her wrong conduct as she did not obey the officer. Let's also see if this is the way she will get screwed up. Update number 2. I saw how many people, have been waiting for this update, right? I apologize for the past 2 weeks have been really, really hectic because of work and other things, and from the beginning until the end, I was just waiting for things to conclude, but I can see that happening tomorrow. I have a lot to tell you already, but first, thank you for all the support, which helped me talk to my wife calmly about the situation. 2 weeks ago, I arrested Karen, my mother-in-law, and took her to the police station. There were formalities to do at the police station, and my mother-in-law was already taken for the interview, where she admitted her mistakes, but not that she was guilty. I know it sounds ironic. I heard strings in my head snap after my friends came out from the interview room and told me how my mother-in-law kept on emphasizing that she was not guilty. The officers pointed out her mistakes and the use of foul language where she would argue, and I quote, "The person was an idiot." I almost admired her for the brave act that she put up there, confessing her guilt while not feeling guilty. It's so darn hard to understand some of the things these Karens do. Some of them that I've come across are so loud and irritating that they spout only rubbish, but some of them are just violent. My mother-in-law is a combo pack, as you may have already known, so she denied the charges and shouting that she wanted to see me. I Went inside and she told me that I should call Sarah, as she would complain to her about me. I wasn't worried about it, despite knowing how it could cause serious pain to my wife. The truth had come out somehow, so I needed to talk to my wife this time. We had a date for a court hearing after 2 weeks, so I took the chance to tell my wife, and 2 weeks would have been enough time for her to gulp this information down and really understand the situation in depth. My mother-in-law was given bail until the hearing, which is tomorrow. I went home late at night and found my mother at her condo. She was sitting on the couch and my wife was holding her hand with her head down, and I called out her name and she looked at me and asked me to follow her into our room. I had no ducking idea what my mother-in-law had told her, but I was to find out soon. As soon as I closed the door behind me, Sarah looked at me in rage and said, and I quote, "How could you do that to my mother? What has she done to you for you to behave so rashly?" I can't even fathom the scenario. Sarah started breathing loudly, and I quickly took out her medicine from the drawer beside our bed and calmed her down. She sat down on the bed, and I sat down beside her, placing my hand on her shoulder, and I told her that I did not know what her mother had said about me or what I had done to her, but honestly, she should listen to me before going so mad at me. She looked at me and asked me to tell her the truth, so I told her everything, from small details from past incidents to the current ruckus that her mother had created. She listened quietly and asked me why I had not told her the truth earlier. I replied that her health made me worried. I thought I could not have made it worse by telling her everything. She further asked why I was telling her this now, and after all that time, I admitted that I was guilty of not telling her, not allowing her the chance to understand reality, and not allowing myself to treat her as an adult who was capable of handling this much pressure on her own. Her eyes were in tears, and she placed her head on my chest and said that her mother told her how I arrested her when a man started a fight, which she only ended. I could not comprehend how my mother-in-law could lie and even manipulate her daughter's mind like that. But I wasn't worried now, knowing my wife knew everything and backed me in my decision. She asked me not to worry and went out to speak to her mother. She wanted to talk politely and calmly, but my mother-in-law is my mother-in-law. I mean, she would not even listen to her daughter. Duh. She accused her of taking my side because she was no longer willing to care for her old, aging mother. I did not go out of the room, allowing my wife to decide what she wanted to do with her mom, knowing she had been charged and had a court hearing 2 weeks later. My mother-in-law continued with her twaddle, and to my surprise, Sarah asked her mother to leave. I rushed out of the bedroom door and saw my mother standing with a look that clearly said she was not expecting this. Her face turned red again, and she sternly eyed me and then Sarah and barged out of the door. It's been 2 weeks already since we last heard from my mother-in-law. I heard she was looking for a lawyer and finally found one. Let's see what happens at the hearing tomorrow. I will keep you guys updated. Update number 3. Another week went by, and I could not find time to update you guys. First things first, this might be my last update unless something really interesting happens. So, a week earlier, the court hearing took place. I'd already updated you about that. I'll tell you exactly what happened, though. My mother-in-law was called for the hearing of her case, where her lawyer accompanied her. There was that handicapped man and that officer present at the scene. The man reiterated his case in court, explaining how my mother-in-law called him every nasty name in the book, used foul language, and crippled her car's side mirror. The guard on duty confirmed this and even included the CCTV footage. Next was an officer in line who stated how my mother-in-law misbehaved then, disobeying and spitting on his face. My mother-in-law's lawyer had nothing to defend against, and my mother-in-law was furious and started shouting at her lawyer, asking how he could take so much money if he did not know how to defend her. The judge had to use the gavel to silence my mother, and she was quickly found guilty of her misconduct after all the evidence was presented. She was to spend 30 days in jail for disobeying and spitting on the officer's face, while she was to pay a fine to the man. Think twice before you assume that everything ended this way, because no, we're talking about my mother-in-law, Karen, and a violent one at that. She could not believe the order of the court and started shouting, "How can you do that?" The judge used his gavel again and said, "Ma'am, I want you to keep quiet." But my mother would not listen, and 2 officers were asked to take her out of the room since the results of her case had already been announced. While leaving the room, she blabbered something again. I did not hear it properly, but I guess the judge did since he called her back in again. He asked her if she had just said what he thought that she said. My mother-in-law admitted it, and I mean clearly she could not lie since there were people present who heard her say it as well. The court held her in contempt of court and announced an additional sentence of 60 days. My mother-in-law just kept apologizing, which was surprising to me. Then she went quiet, seeing that the court was not listening to her anymore. Although I could tell from looking at her face that she could almost burst from her anger. Sarah had not come to court hearings because her mother, to leave was already too much for her anxiety. She was in the process of healing, so when she said she was not feeling like coming to the hearing, I didn't push her. That day, after the hearing, I went home and slept peacefully, like a horse who had been running all his life and finally found refuge to sleep soundly. It's been a week already since my mother was sent to prison. Well, I hope to end my tale here of my nasty mother-in-law. Thank you for the support of you beautiful people. Update number 4. I had thought my last update was the end of the tale, but I've come to tell you a short little update after the period of 1.5 months that my mother-in-law has been out of jail. The judge turned out to be a softie, although I should not say this about the judge, damn it. He reduced my mother-in-law's sentence and forgave her for her misconduct in court. I hope that after spending these past weeks in prison, my mother must have learned a good lesson, but if not, then God bless her, me, and us all. She has not contacted Sarah yet, as I feel she's going to ignore her until she sees herself comes around after a while, and she always does. I'm happy that at least now she'll not bother me or my family's peaceful life. All is well, if it ends well. My warning for you people is to steer clear of Karens. Avoid them and dominate them because they are idiots. What's up, everybody? Mr. Reddito here. So it looks like the drama is finally over with OP and his mother-in-law. Let's go ahead and check out just a couple of comments from the original post and the update ending here. Comment number 1 says, I released a sigh of relief after getting to know you got through it, bro. You are absolutely not the a-hole. Comment 2 says, screw that. Put yourself in the shoes of those whom you call Karen. Reply, no one would want to, so whatever you think, you idiot. Unfortunately, I don't think that's the end that we've seen of racist Linda. I'm actually pretty surprised because the comment section is skipping over how racist this woman was. I mean, she was literally blaming OP for dating her daughter because of his skin color. And she was ridiculous besides the racist part. She was also out of control. I mean, the things that she was doing, first of all, why would the judge go ahead and let her get released from jail early when she made such a scene? She deserved every single day that she got. But I don't think that's the end of her. We're probably going to see some more of her racist self again. I'll let you guys know if there's any more updates that come out about this story. You guys will be the first to hear about it. I will make an update. I will post it in the community section. You will know if we hear from this crazy old lady again. But I do want to hear from you guys. If you were in OP's position, would you have done anything differently? Drop your thoughts down below in the comment section. My name's Mr. Reddito. I narrate stories every single day. If you guys want more dramas like today, I'm talking mother-in-law stories, inheritance dramas, sister-in-law, in-laws, cheating stories, affair partners. We have it all. There's always a story for everybody here on Mr. Redditos. I hope to see you guys tomorrow. Hit that subscribe button. Have a fantastic day. But do remember one thing. It's cool to be kind. And don't be like the mother-in-law in today's story. See ya.